Hi there, guys. Jack Dallas here. I'm sure by now many of you have heard that convicted spy Jonathan Pollard is apparently going to be paroled this coming November by the Obama administration. I just want to talk a little bit about what this event means in terms of diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Israel, and also just how I think this deal reflects the unique relationship that the U.S. and Israel have. And by unique relationship, what I really mean is the stranglehold that Israel has over American politics and American politicians. So, for those of you that don't know too much about Jonathan Pollard, I'm not going to get too much into the background details. I just want to glance over a few things that I think are pretty important to this case. So, the first thing that I want to point out here is the number of people that have spoken out against Jonathan Pollard, not just for him. We've seen a lot of politicians try to back him up, but even you can see here in the second paragraph just on Wikipedia, people like Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, George Tenet, and later on I was reading that during the Clinton administration, Madeleine Albright, people like that were telling Bill Clinton not to pardon him when he was in negotiations with Benjamin Netanyahu during the 90s. And I just think it's interesting to see this sort of back and forth between the different American politicians. Most American politicians owe something to the Jewish lobbies and the money that they pour in to make people able to be successful within elections, and they're pretty much beholden to the Jewish vote and the Jewish money within politics. And I think you'll see overwhelmingly that most politicians, no matter what side they're on, are going to support Pollard, at least vocally in public. So if I go back up to the categories here, the first thing I wanted to discuss as well, just within this whole category of the espionage, one thing that I didn't realize, if you read in here, is that Pollard actually volunteered to be a spy, if you read in here. He wasn't contacted by Israel. He contacted someone within their military, their intelligence department, and said that he had this information that they had not been passing on to Israel, that he felt that they should be sharing with them, and he wanted to volunteer to be a spy. So he wasn't allegedly contacted. He went ahead out and sort of made himself a recruit. He was the one who made the initial contact. I thought that was interesting. One of the things that we constantly heard, and I'm going to get into this more later too, about Pollard is that what he did not out of selfishness or money, but because he genuinely felt that Israel had a right to the sort of security concerns that were found within these documents that he passed on. I really don't think that's true at all. If I were to go over to here, this is interesting. So Alan Dershowitz, a lot of people might know, was one of Jonathan Pollard's defense attorneys. You can see that he wrote in one of his books here, I thought that this paragraph was interesting. He wrote, "Everyone seems frightened to speak up on behalf of a convicted spy." I mean, that's interesting. If you look at the number of American politicians, just to cut out here, that have spoken out on his behalf, that is a bold-faced lie. Just to continue, this has been especially true of the Jewish leadership in America. The Pollards are Jewish. The Pollards are also Zionists, who out of a sense of misguided, quote, racial imperative, to quote Jonathan Pollard, seem to place their commitment to Israeli survival over the laws of their own country. So you can finish up the rest of that on your own. I think that's interesting. You can see here Alan Dershowitz, himself a Zionist, quotes Jonathan Pollard and says that he himself claimed he had a racial imperative. That right there shows that Pollard, from day one, was motivated simply to help his own country, his own people, by selling out American intelligence. Now, guys, if you've followed me for a while, you know that I'm not someone who is sympathetic to the American intelligence community or the American military, to say the least. But at the same time, this kind of logic is something that I think just exposes itself time and time again in American politics, especially how American politics relate to Israel. Because we constantly hear about sort of this, quote, racial imperative. That seems to be what motivates so many of the political decisions. Israel consistently makes political decisions which place it in more of harm's way, and which consistently place America and Americans in harm's way. and that is both financially and militarily. Israel's aggressive policies are what motivate the hatred against it, and it makes it easy for people who want to do bad things, people who legitimately engage in terrorism. It makes it easy for them to recruit people to fight Israel. Secondly, Israel's extreme sort of reliance on American money and also specifically American military, basically donations, since we give them just tons of stuff, just hand over fist. It really is sort of a liability that America cannot afford at this point in our economic, development. We're in such a trying time right now, and we have this country that is just simply living off of our money, just absolutely draining us dry. No country receives as much foreign aid as Israel. We give them tons of military equipment. They then turn around and sell a ton of that equipment. Military equipment is their number one export. We are basically giving them military equipment that they are turning around and selling for their own profit. And I think that this racial imperative is important because it shows, I think, the real loyalty that a lot of these people actually have. When you hear Benjamin Netanyahu on TV talking about the red line and wanting to keep Israel safe and how this is sort of somehow better for America as well, he's completely lying. He is simply trying to make sure that the money keeps flowing and that the tide of influence consistently moves in Israel's direction. The more money and the more military equipment that comes in, the more they can help reshape the Middle East. Notice that ISIS has not attacked Israel, but they have attacked tons of Israel's enemies. That should go to show you whose military intelligence has infiltrated ISIS from day one. It's been America and Israel. Clearly, their activities benefit them. So this racial imperative, I think, it's so important to see Jonathan Pollard mentioning that, because I think that people, like I said, that are in the Israeli top military brass, in the government, the people making decisions, not to mention all the people in the American government that are actually Zionists or, former members of the Israeli government, it just goes to show this is where their true motivation lies, guys. It's in this racial imperative towards the Jewish state and not towards what is actually right for the greater good of the world or this country or anything else. Again, I don't defend our military or the intelligence, but for someone like Jonathan Pollard to just claim that, a quote, racial imperative is good enough for him, I think it's a pretty weak excuse. Not to mention the fact that it's pretty easy to punch holes in that argument. If I move over to this recent Newsweek article, this is from yesterday, it turns out that Pollard basically has a whole bunch of money waiting for him in a Swiss bank account that the Israelis deposited. Now, this might immediately sound like something that's way out in left field, but I did research this quite a bit and found a number of sources that mentioned it. This article just happens to be sort of the most concise. You can see here, basically, the Israeli government was depositing money on a regular basis to a bank account for Pollard, and I guess they tried to set up some kind of arrangement where they would keep doing that. Some of that is speculation as far as what the arrangement is now. They know that money was going in there at one time. What's interesting is if you go down here, some, various intelligence agents were interviewed for this down here. You can see, what was it down here? Former top FBI and National Counterintelligence Directorate officials Spike Bowman. You can see down here he's mentioning about the Swiss bank account. It seems to be something that people in the American intelligence community know about. So Pollard has tons of money, but don't forget, who else did he spy for, you guys? That's right, he did spy for other countries, including Pakistan. That's mentioned up here. So he and other U.S. intelligence officials maintain that Pollard sold documents to Pakistan, South Africa, and two other countries they declined to identify. I was able to confirm that before making the video that Pollard did sell documents to other countries. The reason I bring that up is because, again, I think it punches a lot of holes in his arguments. Two things. One, Pollard claimed that all the spying he did because he felt the specific information in those documents was extremely important to Israel specifically. In other words, the information was essential to Israeli security and Israeli sovereignty, and he felt that it was just absolutely essential that this withheld information went to them. Well, tell me something, Pollard. What does that have to do with Pakistan? What does that have to do with South Africa? If you are thinking that your home country, Israel, is under threat, why are you now selling documents to Pakistan, a country which has a rocky relationship with your country, and South Africa, which is just completely off the map? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. It shows that Pollard's motivation had nothing to do with his own country. And secondly, do you honestly think that Pollard would be doing work for these countries if they weren't paying him as well? And if you read more about that Wikipedia article, you'll see that not only was Israel paying him in cash, but they were paying him in things like fancy rings, jewelry, hotel rooms, fancy meals. I mean, Pollard was not interested in. I mean, he might be a Zionist, you guys. He certainly is, and he might have been, interested in helping Israel no matter what. But his motivation, no secret here, was money, money, money. Okay? If all you cared about was helping poor old Israel, which doesn't need any help, you wouldn't be selling classified documents to Pakistan and South Africa and to other countries as well. You would be helping your country 100%, and you would not be trying to sell out information to the highest bidder, especially countries that have a rocky relationship with yours. I mean, guys, I just want to point out that this guy was interested in helping himself. He is selfish. He is unbelievably selfish. He got himself caught out of his own stupidity. Okay? I mean, it's absolutely insane that we could possibly think that what he was doing was in any way heroic. Interestingly, the Israelis, as soon as Pollard gets back, we all know they're going to be throwing him a parade and everything else. They probably won't put that on TV because, as you've heard many American commentators say, it would look kind of bad if they were celebrating the release of a spy, so I'm sure they'll keep that under wraps. But if you think that Jonathan Pollard isn't going to go home to a life of luxury in Israel, you are dead wrong. This guy is considered a national hero over there. Now, I've consistently heard, and at this point I just want to talk a little bit, guys. I've consistently heard people say, time and time again, I've heard them describe how Pollard's treatment was worse than other, people, spies that have been caught, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you something, guys. Jonathan Pollard never would have received the treatment that he has received now had he been a spy for any other country. First of all, what about the stuff that goes on behind closed doors that we don't know about? How many spies from all different countries get caught within various countries all of the time that we never hear about, that end up in some underground prison for the rest of their life or decades, or just end up being shot in the head and left in some desert somewhere halfway across the world? We don't hear about things like that. We don't hear about the treatment of other spies. This is not stuff that is in the national headlines day in and day out. So for them to say that Pollard was treated badly, I think the fact that he's still alive and well and has his health and this money and is going to be going home is better treatment than most spies would receive. And I mean, who is Israel kidding? Could you imagine if an Iranian spy had been caught, especially amidst this whole nuclear deal, which is why the Obama administration is cutting this deal with Pollard to begin with, Benjamin Netanyahu's all pissed off, along with the rest of the Likud Party, about, this Iran nuclear thing, so Obama decides to blow him a little bit by giving Jonathan Pollard back. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And anyone who thinks that Pollard's treatment has been less than exemplary needs to stop and think, what if it had been a North Korean spy? What if it had been an Iranian spy? What if it had been a Russian spy? I realize those are not quote-unquote allies, but come on, guys, even if it had been, nobody receives the treatment that Israel and the Israelis receive from the United States. Nobody at all. And I am so tired of these people complaining about their treatment. They are the most privileged group of people on the face of the planet. They receive more money from the United States than any other country. They receive more weapons from the United States than any other country. They have the best political connections with the United States, better than any other ally, better than Britain, better than Germany. It does not matter. And they consistently complain. They consistently say they're not receiving enough. Our American students can't afford their student loan bills. Our people cannot afford to pay for health care. Our country is burdened with unfunded liabilities. We have a baby boomer generation about to retire and collapse the whole country. We have a stock market on the verge of collapse, and the Israelis want to complain we're not shipping them enough missiles and ammunition, not giving them enough free money, enough free cash. We need that money here in America. We need to stop extorting our people for their tax dollars and shipping it halfway across the globe to a country that is simply using that money to further its own ethnic cleansing campaign against people like the Palestinians and who are trying to further their own expansion within the region. That's what ISIS is all about. That's what the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were all about. Google the Greater Israel Project, everybody. Everybody out there, just Google Greater Israel. Look at images of the maps. There are Israeli military documents where they talk about taking over the western half of the Middle East. They talk about expanding into other countries, shifting the maps of other countries. They're trying to get pipeline territory for themselves. They're trying to get military outpost territory for themselves so that they can get out there, make more, military installations, missile defense systems, blah, blah, blah. It's sort of the same NATO playbook that you see in places like Ukraine right now. We need to stop giving in to this country that is nothing more than a leech on the American people. This is a bloody leech that is sucking on our people. It is taking our money, it is taking our livelihood, and shipping it over to fund terrorism. The only difference between what Israel does on a daily basis and what countries like, I don't even know, countries that we accuse of terrorism, it's hard to even think of any that actually legitimately engage in it. But let's say, a country like, Saudi Arabia, yeah, that's a hot button issue. There's the other country that you can't criticize in America. They actually do fund terrorism. They don't receive anywhere near the kind of treatment that a place like Israel does. And the only difference between what a place like Saudi Arabia does and what Israel does is in the terminology. If Saudi Arabia funds some small terrorist group to go and bomb a building, it's a terrorist act. If an Israeli fighter jet bombs a group of civilians in Gaza, nobody cares. Whoops, we missed. Sorry, we were shooting at the terrorists. We were shooting at the militants. It's absolutely insane, you guys. The Jonathan Pollard release is just the next disgrace in a long line of disgraces that America has put out there and given into this country that, once again, is simply sucking the lifeblood out of America. We need to stop this special treatment. This is a disgusting, disgusting act. The fact that the Obama administration would give this man back to Israel, this man who sold legitimate military secrets to countries that have nothing to do with Israel for money. And the fact that Israelis would like to have him back and want him to be released and consider him a hero when they maybe don't even realize that Jonathan Pollard also sold military secrets to countries that they have bad relationships with, such as Pakistan, is absolutely ridiculous. That means the Israeli people either don't have a clue or they're just so biased towards their own people, towards the Jews themselves, that they're willing to have anyone back. And honestly, guys, most of the time that's what I think it is. I think that these people in Israel say, you know what, he's one of us. He's a Zionist and we want him back. We don't care what he did. We don't care who he hurt. We don't care about America. As long as the checks keep coming in, as long as the money keeps flying, as long as the missiles keep being shipped overseas to us, we don't care. He's one of us. He's a Jew. He's a Zionist. He's a hero of our country, so we want him back. These people don't care about anyone but themselves, and they won't stop until they have the whole territory they want and the economic control that they want of the entire region. And this has to stop, guys. This has to stop. Israel is controlling our policies in the Middle East. If you don't like the Iraq war, if you don't like the Afghanistan war, if you don't like the wars you don't hear about, like the ones in Libya, like the ones in Syria, we need to stop helping this country that is the true creator of terrorism in the Middle East. So guys, let me know what you think, and once again, we will talk soon.